Hi, I'm Tierney. And yes, I really did spill chocolate on my mother-in-law's dress, but that wasn't the worst thing that happened that day. She dragged me into a side room and cut my hair. My husband, he looked me in the eye and said, "Apologize or leave." I walked out that afternoon with a silk napkin wrapped around my head and 68 missed calls waiting. Turns out, they'd already erased my name off our house deed, and when I started pulling the thread, the whole legacy began to unravel. What kind of family smiles while they rewrite you out of your own life? And what happens when the woman they erased decides she won't stay quiet anymore? It was one of those Sundays in Charleston where the air felt like it had something to prove. Thick, sun-drenched, and stubborn. The kind of heat that didn't ask permission to cling to your skin. Velda loved throwing brunches on days like this. Something about the sweat on everyone else's brow made her glow more effortlessly. We were in the garden of her family estate, surrounded by white linen tables, manicured hedges, and the clink of glasses that held more pretension than alcohol. The guest list was a mix of Charleston's old families, as they like to be called, and the occasional local politician or business leader desperate to be seen. I had been trying, really trying, to keep things light, smile at the right moments, compliment someone's shoes, laugh, but not too loud, be agreeable, be charming, be less me. I was on my way to deliver a dessert plate to one of Velda's bridge friends when it happened. My heel caught a loose edge of the flagstone, and I jolted forward. The plate in my hand tilted, and a slow arc of warm chocolate sauce made its landing, right on Velda's pristine cream silk dress. The garden fell silent. A second earlier, there had been laughter from the next table, someone shaking a cocktail shaker. But now, just the sound of Velda looking down at her dress with the kind of disbelief people usually reserve for natural disasters. "Oh dear God," someone whispered behind me. I stepped forward, instinctively pulling out the linen napkin I'd folded on my wrist like some makeshift server. "I am so sorry, Velda. Let me—" She held up a hand, not to stop me from cleaning, but to command the world to pause. "Some women just weren't raised to understand refinement," she said flatly, her voice slicing through the air. She wasn't yelling. Velda never yelled. That would be vulgar. Instead, she laced her cruelty with grace, like arsenic in a champagne flute. I stood there, frozen. I knew the right thing was to back away. Smile. Excuse myself. Let her win. Instead, I stood my ground. "It was an accident, I swear. Let me help clean it." She looked at me like I'd offered to touch her with used gym socks. "You've done enough," she murmured, turning sharply and walking toward the side of the house, heels digging into the lawn like nails into wood. Behind her, Graham, my husband, was laughing at something someone had said 2 tables over. He hadn't even noticed. Orson, his father, watched it all without blinking. His bourbon swirled quietly in his glass. 5 minutes later, Velda reappeared at my side. "Tierney, dear," she said through a flawless smile. "Would you step inside with me? Just for a moment." I followed. I always did. She led me into a side room just off the main hallway, one of those useless drawing rooms Southern homes have to show off furniture no one uses. The door closed behind us with a soft click. "You embarrassed me," she said, voice still syrupy. "In front of people I've known since debutante season." I said it was an accident. She stepped closer. "Do you think the world gives a damn about your intent? All they see is the stain." Before I could answer, she reached into the antique side table, pulled out a pair of scissors, silver-handled, absurdly sharp. "Velda, what are you— If you want to act like a stray, I'll make sure you look the part." She didn't wait. In one swift motion, she grabbed a chunk of my hair, right from the side where it curled down near my ear, and sliced. I flinched, but didn't move. I didn't scream. I couldn't. The hair fell like a dying leaf to the floor. She didn't say anything else, just left the room. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at the jagged edge, at the way my reflection suddenly felt like someone else's. My breath was caught somewhere between my lungs and my pride. My fingers trembled as I brushed hair off my shoulder. I stayed there longer than I needed to, folding the shock inward, keeping it from spilling over. When I finally walked back out to the garden, the brunch hadn't missed a beat. Velda was back at her table, sipping something cold. Graham was still talking to a client, laughing politely. The guests glanced my way, then glanced away. I tied a linen napkin around my head, covering the side she'd butchered. One woman smiled at me as if I were a child in costume. Someone else chuckled. I passed Graham as I returned to my seat. He looked at me for the first time that morning. "Let's not make a scene, Tierney. It's a brunch, not therapy." I sat quietly, ate nothing, and I realized something in that moment. It wasn't the scissors that cut deepest that day. It was the way everyone acted like it never happened. Velda's real trick wasn't humiliation. It was erasure, and I'd let her do it too many times. I pressed my napkin tighter around my head, not to hide what she did. To remind myself this silence wouldn't last forever. Something in me cracked. I walked back into my apartment without turning on a single light. There was enough glow from the street lamps outside to see everything I needed to. I dropped my keys into the bowl by the door, kicked off my shoes, and just stood there for a moment, staring at the silence that filled every corner of the place. It wasn't peaceful. It was loud in its own way, like an unspoken accusation that clung to the walls. The napkin came off next, the same linen one I had tied around my head, the one that had covered the damage Velda had done like a temporary bandage over a deeper wound. I unfolded it slowly and laid it on the kitchen counter. Chocolate still stained the corner. I could see where the sauce had dried into the weave, a dark smear that felt more like evidence than mess. That napkin had soaked up more than dessert. It had soaked up the last of my patience. I leaned on the counter with both hands, arms locked, my head down. And I started replaying it all, step by step, word by word. The stumble, the splash, her voice like a blade, the scissors in her hand, Graham's blank face, my own mouth, frozen shut. The heat from that garden still clung to my skin, even in the cold air of my apartment. There was no crying. My eyes stayed dry, though my fingers wouldn't stop shaking. Every inhale felt stuck in my throat. I remember thinking, this is what numbness tastes like. Not silence, not pain, just the hollow. I whispered it to myself, the truth Velda had taught me with her carefully veiled threats and picture-perfect cruelty. Silence isn't peace, it's the breeding ground of what's unsaid. I finally looked up and reached for my phone, half out of habit. It lit up before I even unlocked it. One notification, 2, 5, dozens. I opened Instagram first. Why, I still don't know. Maybe I thought someone else had noticed, maybe hoped someone had called it out. Instead, I found Velda's post already live. It was a group shot from the brunch, carefully edited, beautifully lit. Her caption read, "Accidents reveal character." Today reminded me that grace isn't just in how we dress, it's in how we respond. With a heart emoji. My stomach turned. I tapped the photo to expand it. There she was, front and center, a slight smile on her lips. And there I was, blurred in the background, half turned, the side of my head, where the chunk of hair was missing, cropped just enough to be hidden by angle and sunlight. I scrolled through the comments. "Graceful as always, Velda. You handled that with such dignity. I would have lost my mind if that happened to me. Class act." And not one mention of what actually happened. Of me. In that moment, I understood what it meant to be erased without being deleted. She didn't just control the scene, she controlled the story. And I was letting her. I placed the phone down. Not gently. Not hard enough to break, just enough to stop the spinning in my head. I walked to the couch and sat down, but my body didn't relax. I sat stiff, upright, staring at the napkin. That napkin had more presence than I did today. It triggered something in me, a deeper memory. The moment I walked back into that brunch after she cut my hair, I hadn't really let myself replay that fully. Until now. I saw it again, like a reel behind my eyelids, my feet hitting the stone path, my hand adjusting the napkin over my head, the sudden hush, the woman who glanced at me and quickly looked away, the man who whispered to his wife, the sound of someone stifling a laugh. No one asked, not even Graham. He just looked at me like I'd tripped on purpose, And when I sat down beside him, still stunned, he had the nerve to lean in and mutter, "Let's not make a scene, Tierney. It's a brunch, not therapy." I remember my eyes locking on the edge of my fork. The way the silver caught the sun, too bright to look at directly, and I wondered, for the first time in years, if I'd been wrong to think I ever belonged in that world to begin with. But it wasn't just what Velda did. It was what they all let her do. That's the part that stays with you. The silence. Because it's not just about being humiliated. It's about being humiliated in front of people who'd rather pretend it never happened. "It's not just what they do to you," I whispered again, my voice barely louder than breath. "It's what everyone else lets them get away with." And still, the phone buzzed. A text from Graham. "Mom's really upset. You need to fix this." Another. "Please don't make this worse than it already is. Velda, you've embarrassed all of us. Handle this privately or suffer the fallout." I didn't respond. I didn't even open the rest. I just turned the phone face down on the table and stared into the dark of my living room. No TV. No music. Just the sound of my own breathing. Shallow. Steady. I didn't want revenge. I wanted relief. But sometimes, they're the same thing. The morning after the brunch, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the napkin. It was no longer soft linen. It had stiffened overnight into something hard and creased, like the resolve I didn't know I'd carried home with me. The chocolate stain had dried to the color of rust. I didn't touch it. I just stared. The silence in the room was different now, less oppressive, more pointed. It wasn't crushing me. It was carving something out. A shape. A new kind of clarity. I wrapped my hands around a coffee mug I hadn't bothered to warm. The contents were stale, bitter, like the aftertaste of the woman I'd tried to be for the past 3 years. I brought the cup to my lips anyway. It wasn't about comfort. It was about waking up. "When people hurt you in front of others and no one blinks," I whispered to no one, "you realize silence isn't neutrality. It's consent." That's when I knew I wouldn't be apologizing. Not now. Not later. I wasn't sorry for chocolate on her dress. I wasn't sorry for stumbling. I wasn't sorry for making her show everyone exactly what kind of woman she really was. What I was done. A flash crossed my mind. The bathroom at the garden estate. I had ducked in there after she cut my hair, before the walk back to my seat, trying to fix the damage with water and shaking hands. I hadn't been alone. The voice came back to me clearly now. Velda, behind the closed door, talking low but deliberate. I'd stayed still, breath caught in my chest, hiding in one of the stalls. "She always looked desperate to belong," she said to someone. I just helped her realize she never did. The reply had come in a familiar tone. "Isolde, my sister-in-law." "You think she'll say anything?" Velda laughed. Not loudly, just enough. "No, she never does. That's what makes it so easy." They didn't see me when I walked out seconds later. But I saw them, 2 women reapplying lipstick in the mirror like they hadn't just carved me out of the family tree in whispers and powder room laughter. I hadn't been attacked. I had been calculated out. That realization landed deeper than the scissors. I reached for my phone again, this time with purpose. I scrolled through old texts until I found one. Mara, cousin-in-law, estranged from the family years ago after some unexplained falling out with Velda. I hesitated a moment, then typed, "Hey, I know we haven't talked in a while, but I need to ask you something about Velda. Off the record." The reply came 10 minutes later. "You okay?" I smiled at the screen. "Maybe. Define okay." Then I asked what I needed to ask. Her response made my spine straighten. She did the same thing to my brother's fiancé. Called it a test of resilience. Chopped up her self-worth so subtly she didn't realize she'd been dismantled until it was too late. I exhaled. Sharp. Steady. So it wasn't just me. There was a system, and Velda had practiced it. "She's done this before," I whispered. Mara sent one more text. "Abuse doesn't always wear bruises. Sometimes it wears pearls." I looked down at the napkin again. thought about Velda's Instagram caption from the night before. Accidents reveal character. She was right, but not in the way she thought. That's when another memory rose, small but heavy. As I was leaving the brunch, a waiter had stopped me, mid-step, eyes kind, quiet. I hadn't recognized him. Maybe he was new, or maybe he'd been around long enough to know when not to speak. He handed me a folded napkin, discreet, without a word. I hadn't looked at it until now. I stood, walked to where I had tossed my purse the night before, and pulled out the napkin from the side pocket. I unfolded it carefully. In neat block letters, someone had written, "Get out while you still have your voice." It wasn't poetic, it wasn't cryptic, it was advice. A warning, a plea. I sat back down, the paper in my lap, my fingers tracing the letters like they could offer warmth. The waiter had a scar on his temple. I remembered that now. He hadn't smiled, just nodded, like someone who'd seen this show play out before and knew exactly how it ended. I stared at the napkin again. I wasn't imagining it. Someone saw it too, and that meant something. That meant I wasn't just reacting. I was waking up. They wanted me quiet, smiling, still. Velda wanted me erased. Instead, she gave me a reason to rewrite the story. I didn't sleep much that night. The apartment was too quiet, too aware of its walls. Every creak in the floorboards sounded like a question I didn't have the answer to. Around 7:30 the next morning, I brewed a pot of coffee that tasted like cardboard and opened my laptop. I didn't know why I did it. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was that voice inside that said, "If they can lie about you in public, what else have they changed behind your back?" I typed in the county records search site, then entered our address. Just routine, I told myself. Just to confirm. When the screen loaded, I stared at it for a solid minute before realizing what I was reading. The ownership history, the recent amendment, my name, gone, completely removed. Effective date, April 12th. That was 2 months ago. I blinked hard, tried refreshing the page. Nothing changed. I said out loud, to no one but the coffee pot, I never signed anything. And if I did, I was asleep, drugged, or legally blind. And even then, I wouldn't have. Half an hour later, I was standing in line at the Charleston County Records Office, trying not to visibly shake. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and every person in the lobby looked like they'd just lost a fight with a spreadsheet. When I finally made it to the front desk, I handed the clerk my ID and a piece of paper with our address. She typed, clicked, and printed out a few pages. "Here's the updated deed," she said, not unkindly. "Looks like it was amended by Mr. Lott using power of attorney, signed and notarized." My mouth opened, but the words refused to come. I took the papers, walked outside, and sat on the edge of the sidewalk, scanning them again and again like they'd rearrange themselves if I just stared long enough. That's when it hit me. A memory. Barely there. Graham handing me a stack of documents 2 years ago. "Just refinancing stuff," he'd said. "Sign here." "We're consolidating. It'll save us thousands in interest." He kissed me on the cheek, said something about trust. I signed while cooking dinner. I pulled out my phone and called him. "Tierney?" he answered. "No hello? No warmth." "You removed my name from the house?" A pause. "You said you trusted me." "I trusted you to pay the water bill on time, Graham, not to erase me from my own home." He sighed like I was being unreasonable. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." I hung up. He didn't call back. I drove home slowly, stopping at every green light like my brain couldn't coordinate with my foot. Back inside, I sat on the couch with the papers spread out like a broken promise. I didn't cry. There was nothing left to cry over. Instead, I called Eleanor. She had been my mother's lawyer, years ago. Now retired, but still sharp as a blade in the drawer no one touches. "This is more common than you think," she said after I explained. Women being slowly removed from their own assets. It's not an accident. It's a system. You weren't removed by mistake. You were written out by design. She told me about estate simplification, legal loopholes, the way some families play chess while pretending they're at Bible study, And I knew who taught Graham the rules. Velda. Of course she had her fingerprints all over this, probably stood behind him at the notary's office, purse on her arm, smiling like a proud mentor. She always called me emotional, because that's how you dismiss someone's truth. Call it dramatic, call it overreacting, then file the paperwork while they're defending their tone. No more. I pulled out my phone again and left him a voicemail. You built a home on lies, Graham, and you stripped me from it while I was seasoning chicken and trying to save us money. You may own the walls now. But I'm going to take apart everything inside, brick by brick. I scheduled a consultation with Majorie Vexler the next morning. Eleanor said she was the only one in town Velda ever lost a fight to. I believed it. That night, I cleaned off the kitchen table, laid out every document, every text, every napkin and note, even the one the waiter had given me. Then I opened the file cabinet I hadn't touched since Mom died. Inside, it was a folder I forgot I kept, the napkin, a contract Graham once had me sign, and a lie filed under just paperwork. It's funny how they tried to erase me in ink without realizing I kept every receipt. When I got back from the records office, the Charleston heat had settled into the walls of my apartment like it meant to stay for good. The air was thick, heavy with the kind of stillness that makes even the ceiling fan sound accusatory. I dropped my keys, left my shoes by the door, and walked straight to the closet in the hallway. There was a box up high, tucked behind winter coats I hadn't worn in 2 years. I stood on my tiptoes and dragged it down, dust falling like memory. It was a keepsake box. Graham used to call it Tierney's time capsule. I hadn't touched it since before the wedding. At the time, I thought it was for preserving sweetness. What I found inside now felt like a vault of things that had quietly rotted. The silk napkin from the brunch was folded neatly on top. That wasn't surprising. What was, though, was the small satin pouch beneath it. I didn't remember putting it there. I opened it. A curl of hair. My hair. Curled, trimmed, tied with a pale pink ribbon. I stared at it like it might bite me. Then the flash came. Velda, in the middle of her garden frenzy that morning, wrapping something quickly in tissue paper and tucking it into her handbag. I hadn't thought much of it then. Just Velda being Velda, always fussy, always arranging. But this was something else. This wasn't just about control. This was a ritual, a trophy. My stomach twisted. My hands gripped the pouch tighter. That's when I remembered the voicemail. I opened my phone and replayed it, half out of disbelief. Velda's voice, smooth as ever. You'll look back on this and realize I was right. Sometimes women need shaping. Shaping. Like I was clay. Like she'd been molding me all along. Cutting away what didn't fit her idea of proper. And keeping a piece of me, literally, to remind herself she had succeeded. My fingers curled around the box so hard the edges bent. That night, I couldn't eat. Couldn't read. I just sat in the dark with that lock of hair on the table, staring at it like it might explain something. The next morning, I was jolted awake by the sound of something landing at my door. A package. No return label. Just my name written in perfect cursive. I brought it in and opened it slowly, already guessing what was inside. A velvet ring box. Inside it, my wedding ring. Clean, shiny, detached. And a note, return to sender. My body didn't react right away. It was like my nerves had gone on strike. I stood in my kitchen holding that box, heart not beating fast enough to match the fury building beneath my skin. The phone rang. It was Graham. I stared at the screen until the fourth ring, then answered. This is getting out of hand, he started. I waited. Why are you dragging it out? He asked, tone sharpened now. You're making everything harder. I laughed. Soft, mean. You mailed back a promise like it was junk mail, I said. I'm just returning the energy. Tyranny. You know what's worse than betrayal? I said, cutting him off. Cowardice. You couldn't even hand it to me, just boxed me up like guilt and tossed me back to sender. He didn't say anything, so I hung up. And this time, he didn't call back. I stared at the ring box on the counter for another hour before I finally opened my toolbox. I'd never changed a lock before. But there was a first time for everything, wasn't there? The deadbolt resisted at first, but I kept turning, unscrewing, refitting, until the old one fell into my hand. I dropped it in the trash. The new lock slid in easier than I expected, like the door was waiting for it. I turned the bolt, tested it once, twice. Solid. For the first time in months, I exhaled without feeling like someone might crawl through my front door just because they still had a key. If they're so eager to erase me, I muttered, I might as well make sure I can't be re-entered. By afternoon, I was back at the kitchen table, a legal pad in front of me, the wedding ring beside it, next to the napkin, the hair, and the notarized paperwork I'd pulled from the file cabinet 2 nights ago. They thought they were burying me in paperwork, but I'd kept my own records. They returned what they thought I'd cling to. But I've got something they can't ship back. A reason. By the time I pulled into the cracked parking lot of Majorie Vexler's law office, the sun was beginning its lazy descent behind the line of brick buildings in Savannah. I hadn't been to this part of town in years, not since my mother's estate was settled. Everything looked the same, aged but firm, like Majorie herself. Her office was small, but everything in it had weight. Heavy books, thick curtains, dark wood furniture that didn't try to impress, but dared you to question its permanence. She didn't offer me tea, didn't try to comfort me. She just gestured to the chair opposite her desk with one sharp nod and said, "Start from the top." So I did. The napkin, the scissors, the hair in a pouch, the deed, the ring in the box, the voicemails. All of it. I expected her to interrupt, ask questions. She didn't. She just listened, pen in hand, scribbling notes with a steadiness that unnerved me. When I finally stopped, she leaned back, cracked her knuckles, and said, "I've dealt with your mother-in-law before." That stunned me. "Velda Strickland?" I asked. Majorie nodded. "She buries everything in whispers and legal filings, but not deep enough." She reached down into her file drawer, rifled through folders, then pulled one out, marked in red ink. Strickland, 2007. She slid it across the desk. Inside was a typed statement from Orson's first wife's sister. It detailed a years-long pattern of psychological control, Velda engineering social isolation, pressuring financial decisions, manipulating medical power of attorney when the woman fell ill. There was even a handwritten letter, tear-stained, where the sister-in-law pleaded for help navigating what she called a marriage she never saw coming. She didn't file anything legal, Majorie explained, but she wanted someone to know. I sat still, fingers on the page, barely breathing. "This isn't about you," Majorie said. "Yeah, it's about what happens when someone dares resist her blueprint." The room felt heavier suddenly, like Velda herself had just walked in. "She's built a legacy on being untouchable," Majorie continued. "Polished pearls over dirty hands." I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to stay even. "And the ones she hurts? Get buried," she said simply, "unless they document." That night, after the long drive back to Charleston, I walked into my apartment with a different kind of weight. I didn't feel scared. I felt documented. I pulled out my phone and opened a message from Mara, the cousin-in-law who had first confirmed Velda's patterns weeks ago. Attached was a photo, an old leather-bound notebook. Velda's notebook. I remembered it immediately. I'd seen it on her desk once during a brunch setup. She had scribbled something in it with the casualness of someone writing a grocery list, then snapped it shut like it contained nothing but recipes. In the photo, I could see the heading on the page, Family Conduct Notes, and then my name, underlined in red. Tierney Fay, resistant, disruptive, entitled, filed, labeled, ranked like a problem employee. She hadn't just disapproved of me. She'd documented my non-compliance. I wasn't just an outsider, I was evidence. That night, I started building a ledger of my own. I laid out everything. Photos of the wedding ring, screenshots of text messages from Graham, the voicemail from Velda, copies of the property transfer. I even recorded a voice note of myself narrating the events from the brunch, every detail, time-stamped. "They wrote me down in red," I whispered as I organized the files. "I'm about to write the truth in black and white." I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet, but I knew I wasn't going to keep it hidden. I pulled out a USB drive from my drawer, labeled it Legacy, and saved the folder. Then I backed it up to the cloud. Twice. Velda wanted a legacy worth protecting. She shouldn't have handed me the evidence to destroy it. The email landed in my inbox late Tuesday afternoon. Subject: Corwin Foundation Annual Gala, honoring our community pillars. I opened it while eating lunch. Leftover soup, barely warm. There, in digital calligraphy and gold trim, was my name. Special recognition, Tierney Faye Lott. I laughed, loud enough to make the spoon clatter. Special recognition. After all the erasure, after the napkin, the scissors, the contract, now I was worthy of decoration. Not because I was seen, but because I served as proof. Their PR game needed me. They wanted me erased, I muttered, closing my laptop. Now they want me to decorate their stage. Fine, let them. By Thursday, I dusted off the black folder. Not metaphorically, literally. It was full now. Names, timestamps, deeds, screenshots. I labeled flash drives with precision, backing everything up 3 times. No one buries a woman who keeps receipts. That night, a friend texted me a link. You seen this? It was a video. Me, at the brunch, edited to hell. The lighting dimmed to make me look wild-eyed. The audio warped. Velda's voice calm, mine distorted. I never yelled at her, not once, but in this version, I was storming. There were captions. Entitled DIL Melts Down at Garden Party. I didn't need to look far to find the source. The watermark in the corner belonged to a PR firm Velda's foundation had used for years. I called Majorie. They're trying to build a case, she said bluntly. Not just in court, publicly. If they can make you look unstable, everything else becomes noise. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. Then we don't whisper. We document. She paused, then added, You're not the first woman I've seen turned into someone's cautionary tale. That night, I sent Willa the original video, raw, unedited, time-stamped, the clip Velda never expected anyone to keep. The next day, another crack appeared, a message request on social media from an unfamiliar name. A woman claiming she used to work in the Corwin house. She didn't say much at first, just asked if we could talk. I gave her a burner number. We spoke at midnight. I don't know if this matters, she said, voice shaking, but Mrs. Strickland once offered me money to say you'd had an episode, that you yelled, threatened her, broke a plate. My blood ran cold. She told me to say you had a breakdown. I didn't feel right about it. Do you still have the message? A pause. Yes. Would you let me record this call? I asked. Just audio. Another pause. Then, yes. I recorded every word. When I hung up, I didn't feel powerful. I felt poisoned. This isn't protection, I whispered to myself. It's premeditated character assassination, and Velda had practiced it to perfection. The next morning, another email arrived, this one from Orson Creed himself. We trust you will help us preserve the dignity of this weekend's event. We hope you won't create further division at the gala. I drafted a reply but never sent it. Division was created when your wife cut my hair and your son mailed my vows back in a box. Instead, I showed up to the gala, wearing black, lipstick red enough to make Velda's pearls twitch. I walked into the Charleston Historic Society's ballroom like I belonged there, and brought the receipts to prove otherwise. 1 flash drive in my clutch, 1 with Willa, and a 3rd mailed anonymously to the press. They handed me a microphone. I just chose not to use it the way they expected. The chandeliers looked like they'd been scrubbed with money. Every crystal shimmered like it had something to prove. The entire ballroom at the Charleston Historic Society glowed with a practiced perfection. Flawless table settings, soft jazz drifting under the murmur of Charleston's finest, and enough pearls per neck to fund a private college. They called it a charity gala, but no one was here to give. They were here to be seen. And there I was. Black jumpsuit, red lipstick, hair swept up, exposing every inch of the neckline they once tried to cut away. I didn't wear armor. I wore intention. They dressed this night in charity, I said to myself. I came in war paint. I made my way to my assigned seat near the stage, center, but not too close, like they weren't sure how to label me now. Graham wasn't in sight. Velda was, though. She stood by the champagne tower, smiling at guests, her pearl earrings swinging like judgment. When her eyes met mine, her smile didn't falter, but it didn't reach her eyes either. She raised her glass slightly, like a dare. I didn't lift mine. Halfway through the evening, I excused myself from the table. No one stopped me. I made my way to the press table at the back, where Willa Kerrigan sat behind a small laptop and a recorder. I slipped the flash drive into her hand beneath the linen cloth. No words exchanged, just a nod. She closed her laptop. I walked away. Inside that drive was the truth. Unedited video of the brunch, the haircut, the ledger, the property transfer, and a copy of the text messages Velda never thought I'd save. If they want the public's respect, I had told Willa earlier that week, let the public see the whole picture. And now they would. 2 days before the gala, I'd met Graham at a coffee shop on Broad. I wore no makeup. He looked like he hadn't slept. We sat across from each other like strangers with a contract dispute. "You made me sign away my house," I began. "Your mother cut my hair in a room full of porcelain. You've both tried to rewrite my life and then stamp my name across a charity program like a gold star for good behavior." He rubbed his temples. "Just let it go, Tierney. This isn't helping anyone." "No," I said, "but exposing it might help the next woman you try to gaslight." His hands stilled. "You're going to make this ugly." I leaned back. "No, Graham. You made it ugly. I'm just turning on the lights." He didn't apologize. He didn't even argue. He just looked away. And I walked out before he finished his latte. Back in the ballroom, they were calling names. Applause rolled like polite thunder. Waiters moved through the aisles with desserts that no one would touch. My name was next. "Tonight," the MC said, "we honor a woman of resilience, a woman who has endured and emerged stronger. Tierney Faye Lott." Applause. I stood, walked to the podium. The mic waited. I looked out over the room, at Velda, at Orson, at the faces that had once smiled at me like I was charity, like I was salvageable. I leaned toward the mic. "Thank you," and stepped back. Gasps whispered across the tables. I turned and nodded toward Willa. The projection screen behind me went black. Then it lit up. They gave me 5 minutes on stage. I gave them 5 years of receipts. The lights dimmed only slightly, but the room changed in an instant. The hum of background conversation dipped to a hush as the screen behind the stage flickered from black to life. For a split second, I could feel every pair of eyes in that ballroom shift, from the speaker to the projection. Then came the sound. Not music, not an introduction. A sharp, candid voice. Mine. "I said it was an accident. Please, please don't." Then silence. Then the cut. The video played in raw, unedited clarity. Velda's hand gripping the scissors. My hair being sliced. Her voice, calm but sharp, echoing over champagne glasses and shocked faces. "If you want to act like a stray, I'll make sure you look the part." It was surreal, watching myself from the outside. I remembered the cold of those scissors, the shame. But I hadn't known how quiet the room had gone, how many guests had turned their heads, turned their backs, and said nothing. The screen cut to a side-by-side. Velda's edited brunch video versus mine, the timestamp comparison, the captions, the manipulation exposed like a cracked veneer. Then came still images, screenshots of texts, financial documents, the photo of the red-marked ledger, and last, a statement in plain black font. "Grace is not a shield for abuse." The room didn't erupt. It sank. Murmurs. Gasps. Someone dropped a glass. I didn't look to see who. I looked at Velda. Her face was frozen, not in horror, but in calculation. She was already assessing her next move. But the light from the projector danced across her pearls, casting shadows that didn't ask for interpretation. The truth wrapped around her like a noose made of spotlight. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just let the room shift around her. Willa stood at the edge of the crowd, arms folded. A reporter leaned over to whisper something. Another scribbled notes. The tide had turned, and not because I'd screamed or slammed my fist. I had just let them watch. Velda always believed power came from control. She forgot what happens when people finally see. The following morning, the Charleston Tribune ran with the headline, "Charity Queen or Curtain Call?" By mid-afternoon, questions about the Corwin Foundation's financials were flooding city forums and social media. It didn't take long for someone to bring up the hurricane fund. An older man, whose wife sat 2 tables behind me at the gala, told a local podcast, "We were promised assistance, never heard a word." Another family stepped forward, then another. The receipts weren't just about me anymore. She hadn't just manipulated her family. She'd sold the city an illusion and kept the checks. I watched it unfold from my couch, phone buzzing, new voicemails, emails from strangers. Some women wrote, "Thank you for saying what I never could." One woman, whose name I didn't recognize, wrote, "You reminded me I'm not crazy." Then came the email from Willa with the link to her published piece. The Red Ledger, Unraveling the Woman Behind the Foundation. It included quotes, legal records, and full-length footage from the gala. That same day, I went to the storage unit Graham and I once shared. I needed to retrieve a few documents I hadn't backed up. The unit still smelled like cedar and stale linen. I pulled down a plastic bin marked Memories. Inside were framed photos, our wedding, vacations, holidays. Except one was missing. Then I saw it. A reprinted family photo from our wedding day. But I wasn't in it. I mean, I was there. The pose was familiar, but someone had cropped me out, just enough to erase the face. In my place stood Isolde, holding Velda's hand. I almost laughed. A tear gathered in the corner of my eye, not from sadness, but from disbelief and pride. "You can crop me from your wall, Velda," I said aloud. "You can't erase what I just carved into your reputation." I closed the bin, left everything else untouched. By nightfall, Willa's article had been picked up by 2 regional outlets. A lawyer I hadn't spoken to in years called and said, "We may have grounds for a countersuit, defamation, emotional distress, even slander." I thanked him, but told him I needed time. The truth was, I wasn't sure what I wanted yet. Victory didn't look the way I expected. It didn't taste sweet. It tasted like exhaustion. I turned off the lights in the apartment, locked the door, and curled up on the couch. My phone buzzed nonstop, still vibrating even when I flipped it face down, and then I noticed it, an envelope on the floor near the door. Not emailed, not texted, mailed. Creed Strickland Law. I picked it up like it might bite me. Because whatever was inside, it wasn't an apology. The envelope sat on my kitchen table like it knew something I didn't. Cream-colored, thick as wedding stationery, with my name written in a typeface too clean to be personal. I stared at it for several minutes, letting the early morning light creep across the countertop until it kissed the edge of the flap. My coffee had gone cold, but I hadn't moved. Finally, I opened it. Creed Strickland Law. Letterhead in raised ink. The first paragraph called me emotionally erratic. The second accused me of harassment. The third warned of irreparable reputational harm to a philanthropic institution. My favorite line was in the fourth. Social sabotage. Social sabotage. The same woman who sliced my hair in a room full of heirlooms now claimed I had damaged her public image. I leaned back in my chair, letting the paper rest against my chest. "They're not trying to stop the story," I whispered. "They're trying to rewrite the ending." I folded the letter in half, set it aside, and opened my laptop. The news cycle hadn't calmed. If anything, it had sharpened. 2 local stations ran with the headline, "The Foundation Fracture." More guests from the gala had come forward, quietly, anonymously, describing discrepancies in donation distributions and stories of aggressive silence within the board. Velda was quietly removed from 3 foundation boards within 48 hours. Orson released a statement about a personal leave to focus on family matters. The irony was so thick I could spread it on toast. My phone rang. It was a woman from the Women's Shelter Committee. I hadn't spoken to her in 2 years. "I saw what they did to you," she said. "I've been there too. No one believed me back then." Another woman texted simply, "Thank you." Each message hit like a soft blow. gentle but real. I wasn't just a headline now. I was a voice someone else had needed. That felt heavier than shame ever did. Justice isn't clean, I told Willow when she called later. It's often bruised and tired, but it shows up anyway. That afternoon, I wrote a letter of my own. Well, Majorie helped with the legal phrasing, but the sentiment was mine. To Creed Strickland, we are prepared to countersue for defamation, emotional distress, and coercion. All further communication should be directed to legal counsel. Attached is documentation supporting our claims. I slipped the letter into the same envelope they'd sent me, now resealed. Then I added something else, a velvet box. Inside it, my wedding ring. No note, just the ring. If they wanted a symbol, they could have one. I was returning what they thought defined me. Later that week, I met with Majorie in her downtown office, where the walls smelled like paper and old victories. We went over everything: backup drives, audio files, witness statements. I handed her a binder labeled Legacy, sharpied in thick black. She reviewed it like a prosecutor preparing for war. "You don't just bury tyrants," she said. "You archive them." I smiled. They taught me how to play small. I learned how to record everything. We uploaded the files to 2 cloud accounts, 3 drives, and 1 encrypted server. By the time I left her office, it was nearly sunset. The humidity had broken, but the air still felt full of waiting. That night, I didn't celebrate. I didn't even turn on music. I sat on my couch, lights off, watching the window. Then, 2 knocks at my door. Not urgent, not impatient, just exact. I didn't move. That family doesn't knock. They warn. I turned off my phone, sat still. Some victories start in silence and stay there. I didn't move when the door knocked. Not the first time, not the second, just 2 deliberate taps, like punctuation. A warning dressed as courtesy. The clock blinked past midnight. The lights were off, and I sat in the corner of the living room, legs folded, back against the wall like I was still learning how to breathe inside my own skin. But I wasn't scared. Not this time. Whatever waited on the other side of that door had already done its damage. There was nothing left to take. If they wanted to scare me, I whispered to myself, they forgot I've already lived through worse, under their roof. Eventually, the hallway grew quiet again. The knock didn't come back. It never does when it's them. They don't ask. They don't apologize. They imply. And they disappear. The next morning, I made coffee without thinking. Routine still had its place, even after you've dismantled a legacy. I sat at the table scrolling, trying to ignore the ache behind my eyes. A notification buzzed from a shared family photo archive. I hadn't remembered I was still tagged in. Isolde had posted a new album titled Corwin Family History. Out of morbid curiosity, I opened it. There was our wedding photo. Except it wasn't. I recognized the pose, the archway, the floral arrangement. But something was different. My face, blurred, subtly, like someone had smeared me into forgettable softness. They didn't delete me. They just diluted me. I forwarded the screenshot to Majorie. No words. She'd know what to do with it. "When they rewrite you out of their version of the past," I muttered, "you stop trying to explain your side. You build your own." Later that day, I stepped out to the grocery store, sunglasses on, trying to blend back into my own city. In the canned soup aisle, a woman paused next to me, probably mid-60s, worn wedding ring, the kind of blouse my mom used to wear. She didn't say much, just this. "You spoke. Thank you." That was it. She walked away. On the sidewalk, a man in a navy suit glanced at me, gave the slightest nod, and kept moving. It didn't fix anything, but something had shifted. Back home, I checked messages. One from Majorie. The foundation was under internal audit. Velda's personal finances were being reviewed. Quietly, of course. No press release, no scandal yet. But the machine was stalling. "The world didn't burn," I said aloud, to no one. "But their ivory tower sure has smoke coming out the windows." That afternoon, I walked down to the Charleston Public Library. The basement smelled like dust and ambition. I'd reserved a small room to start an art workshop for women. Nothing official yet, just a space. A start. The librarian, a tall woman with the kind of haircut that said, "No nonsense," handed me a form. "Need a grant application?" "No," I said. "Just space. I'll build the rest myself." By dusk, I sat alone at one of the folding tables, sketching ideas in a notebook. Not revenge, not red ink, just lines, colors, blank spaces to be filled by stories no one had let us tell. Creation over confrontation, progress over performance. The air in the room was still, not heavy, not threatening, just quiet in a way I could finally stand to sit inside. My phone buzzed. I almost didn't look. But something about the number made my hand hover. I knew it. I had erased it months ago. I thought I'd buried it under silence and court filings. It buzzed again. I thought I'd closed every chapter, but then my phone buzzed, with a number I'd erased. The call came at 10:04 a.m. Sunlight cut through my kitchen like a scalpel, sharp and unbothered. I was halfway through a bowl of granola I wasn't even hungry for. The phone vibrated twice before I reached it. No name, just a number, but I knew. I answered. "This has gone too far," Graham said, not angry, just tired, like someone who finally realized the fire he let burn had reached the curtains. "No," I said, voice steady. "It's gone just far enough." Silence stretched. Then he sighed. "Mom's unraveling. This is destroying us." There it was, the us he'd held on to while letting me go, as if the damage was mutual, as if he hadn't stood on the porch and watched her cut me down, strand by strand. "Then maybe," I said slowly, "you should have stood between us when I needed you most. You stood behind her. I stood up for myself." I could feel him trying to gather breath, maybe to apologize, maybe to defend, but I didn't need to hear it. I hung up. The phone slid back onto the table like a closing book. That call was the last chapter I owed him. Everything after this belonged to me. By noon, Willa called. "Tierney, it's spreading." Her voice was laced with something between awe and urgency. A former Corwin board member came forward. She has internal documents, emails, financial trails that go back years. It wasn't just bad accounting. It was systematic. My grip tightened on the mug in my hand. I didn't say anything. Willa continued. "The story's moving. National outlets are picking it up. This is bigger than Charleston." I walked to the window. Outside, a woman was walking her dog, completely unaware that a dynasty was crumbling behind curtains and closed doors. "I thought I'd just shaken one house of cards," I said. "But it was a network." Willa asked if I'd consider a final interview. Something to close the loop. My terms, my voice. I agreed. 2 days later, I sat in a Charleston radio studio. It smelled like dust and foam. The host kept it short, left me room. "I didn't burn anything down," I said, my voice clear through the headset. "I just stopped holding up the walls they built with silence." The next morning, sponsors began pulling out. Quiet emails, public statements. The foundation froze new projects pending structural review. I watched it all unfold from my laptop, the way people watch storms, safe but not removed. Later, Willa messaged, "You didn't just take them down, you made it easier for others to rise." A year passed. The workshop I started in the library basement became a nonprofit. We didn't just paint. We told stories. Women wrote, sculpted, performed. We had a waiting list, a volunteer board. We made our own kind of legacy. On one wall, I hung quotes in mismatched frames. "You don't have to be loud to be powerful. I'm not the woman they sent away. I'm the woman they can't silence." One afternoon, I received an envelope. No return address. Inside, a note. "You gave me courage. I didn't recognize the handwriting. I didn't need to." That night, I sat at my kitchen table, same spot where I'd once read the letter that tried to shrink me. I opened the drawer, pulled out the last paper copy of the cease and desist, lit a match, watched it burn, slow and clean. "I didn't need revenge," I whispered. "I needed truth. And sometimes, the truth is the sharpest justice there is." They wanted me erased. But now, they're the ones no one trusts with a pen, and if they try to rewrite me again, well, I still own the ink.